Flowers have always spoken to me more clearly than people. That night, I remember thinking the lilies on the dining table were wilting. Their white petals curled inward, bruised at the edges, as if they already knew what was coming. I reached out to adjust the vase, my fingers trembling, when the front door slammed so hard the glass rattled in its frame. Dante was home. I didn't turn right away. I knew better than that. I listened instead, to the sharp rhythm of his footsteps, to the way his breath sounded heavy and uneven, like a storm dragging itself down the hallway. "You didn't answer your phone," he said.
His voice was calm.
That was always the most dangerous part. "I was in the back," I said, keeping my tone soft. Neutral. I didn't hear it. Silence followed. Not the kind that invited conversation. The kind that waited. I turned slowly. Dante stood near the mirror in the entryway, still in his coat, his tie loosened, his jaw tight. He stared at his reflection like it had personally betrayed him.
"They gave it to him," he said.
"The promotion." I swallowed. "I'm sorry." He laughed then, short and sharp. "Sorry," he repeated. "Do you know what I sacrificed for that position?" I didn't answer. Experience had taught me that anything I said would be wrong. He moved closer. I felt it before I saw it. The shift in the air, the way my chest tightened. "Do you know what it feels like," he continued, "to be overlooked? To be humiliated?" "I know it's hard," I said carefully. "But we'll get through." The sound came first. A crack like lightning. I barely registered the movement before my back slammed into the mirror. Pain exploded across my shoulders as the glass shattered, sharp and cold, slicing as it gave way. I hit the floor hard, breath knocked from my lungs, surrounded by glittering fragments that reflected the ceiling light in 1,000 cruel pieces. For a moment, there was no sound at all. I lay there, staring at the fractured version of myself staring back. My face multiplied and distorted, eyes wide, mouth parted in shock. Blood bloomed warm and slow against the chill of the floor. Dante stood over me, chest rising fast. "You made me angry," he said. Something inside me cracked then quietly, finally. Not the mirror. Something deeper. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My heart thudded strangely, slow and heavy, as if it had forgotten its rhythm. The edges of the room blurred. The lights dimmed. I remember thinking, so this is how it ends. Hands touched me, someone else's, distant voices speaking urgently. I floated somewhere above it all, watching as strangers hovered over my body. One of them pressed fingers to my neck. "I can barely feel a pulse," a voice said. Another voice answered, tense. "She's crashing." Cold spread through me, vast and quiet. Fear didn't follow. Only stillness. In that darkness, I let go. Not of life, but of fear. I didn't promise myself revenge. I didn't plan an escape. I simply understood, with sudden clarity, that the woman who had accepted silence, softened herself, and bloomed smaller to survive was gone. When warmth returned, when air filled my lungs again, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never lie broken on the floor again. Not for him. Not for anyone. And somewhere beyond the beeping machines and hushed voices, something fierce and sharp took root inside me, like glass catching the light, dangerous and unyielding. I was still Sloane Mercer, but I was no longer his. I woke to the steady sound of beeping, slow and insistent, like a metronome reminding my heart how to work. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I let the sensation of existence return piece by piece. The weight of the blanket, the faint ache threaded through my body, the dry taste in my mouth. Light pressed against my eyelids. When I opened them, the ceiling above me was unfamiliar, too white, too clean. A room that was not mine. A nurse noticed my movement and stepped closer. "You're awake," she said gently. Her voice was kind.
Real.
It cut through the fog like a blade. "What happened?"
I asked.
My voice sounded different to my own ears. Lower, steadier. She hesitated, then chose her words carefully. "You had an episode at home. Your heart rate dropped very low. You scared us for a moment." An episode. I almost laughed. Memories returned in sharp flashes. The mirror, the impact, the cold floor, Dante's voice. My fingers curled beneath the blanket, nails biting into my palm. I felt the urge to shake, to cry, to ask where he was. Instead, I asked, "Am I alone?" The nurse nodded. "You asked not to have visitors." That surprised me. I didn't remember saying it, but I was glad I had. After she left, the silence settled around me. Not Dante's silence. Not the heavy, punishing kind. This silence felt like space. Like possibility. I turned my head and caught my reflection in the darkened screen of a monitor. My face was pale, shadowed, marked with faint discolorations that told a story I had spent years editing for others. Something in my eyes had changed. I searched for the familiar softness, the woman who apologized too quickly, who believed love meant endurance. She wasn't there. In her place was someone watching, measuring, awake. When the doctor came in later, he spoke in calm tones about rest and recovery. I nodded at the right moments, answered when spoken to. Inside, something else was happening, something precise and deliberate. I wasn't planning yet. I was deciding. Deciding that I would leave. Deciding that Dante would never see me broken again. Deciding that fear no longer got to choose for me. By the time they discharged me, the choice had hardened into resolve. They asked if someone could pick me up. I gave a name without hesitation. Kaelen Reed. My brother's best friend. The boy who used to walk me home from school when I was younger because he said the streetlights went out too early. The man who had looked at me once, years ago, like he saw something precious, and then stepped back when I married Dante. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. When he arrived, the air in the room shifted. He filled the doorway quietly, broad shoulders tense, jaw set tight. His eyes found mine instantly, and something raw crossed his face before he masked it. "Sloan," he said softly. That single word undid something in my chest. "I need help," I said. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at the marks on my skin, didn't demand explanations. He simply nodded once, like a promise being honored. "I've got you," he said. As we walked out together, I didn't look back. The woman who had been carried out on a stretcher no longer existed. I was walking on my own now, toward something unknown, yes, but also toward safety. Toward truth. Toward a door I knew would open. And as Kaelen's presence steadied my steps, I understood something else. I hadn't just survived. I had returned, sharp-edged, clear-eyed, and finally ready to be free. Kaelen didn't ask where I wanted to go. That alone told me I had chosen correctly. The drive was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand explanations or apologies. Streetlights slid past the windows, blurring into soft streaks of gold, and with every mile, something tight inside my chest loosened. When the car finally stopped, I looked up at the familiar house, solid, warm, unchanged. A place that had always felt safe even when I hadn't known why. Kaelen turned off the engine. "You can stay as long as you need," he said simply. I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, the resolve holding me upright might crack. Inside, the house smelled faintly of clean linen and something earthy, grounding. He set my bag down gently, like it might break if handled roughly. I noticed how careful he was, not just with me but around me. "Sit," he said, motioning to the couch. "I'll get you some water." I obeyed, my body suddenly heavy, the adrenaline draining away now that I was somewhere safe. When he returned, he placed the glass in my hands without touching my fingers, as if giving me space was its own form of protection. "You don't have to tell me anything tonight," he said. "But I need you to know something." I looked up at him. "If you're here," he continued, his voice low but steady, "then whatever brought you here ends now." The words settled deep. I stared at the glass, watching my reflection ripple. "He hit me," I said. The room went very still. Kaelen didn't move, didn't interrupt. But I saw it, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands curled slowly at his sides, like he was gathering himself. "He lost something," I went on, my voice strangely calm. "And I became the place where he put that anger." Kaelen inhaled through his nose, then exhaled carefully. Did he hurt you before? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Not like this. Silence followed. Heavy but controlled. I should have said something, I whispered. I kept thinking it would pass. That if I was quieter, softer. No, he said firmly. I looked up. No, he repeated, stepping closer but stopping just short of touching me. That wasn't your failure. That was his choice. Something in his voice, absolute, unshakable, made my throat tighten. I thought I was gone, I admitted. On the floor. I thought that was it. Kaelen crouched in front of me then, finally meeting my eyes at the same level. But you're here. Yes, I said. And I'm not afraid anymore. His gaze searched my face, like he was seeing me for the first time and the same time all over again. You don't have to be, he said quietly. Not ever again. That night, I slept in the guest room, wrapped in blankets that smelled like clean cotton and safety. I didn't dream. I didn't wake in panic. For the first time in a long while, my body rested. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the floor. I stood at the window, watching dust motes drift, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Hope. Behind me, I heard Kaelen's footsteps pause at the doorway. Coffee's ready, he said. I turned to face him. This wasn't the beginning of my escape. This was the beginning of my reckoning. And for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. The house changed after that morning. Not in any way that could be seen but felt. Like the walls themselves had shifted to make room for me. Kaelen moved through the space with quiet awareness, never crowding me, never watching too closely. He let me exist without expectation, and that alone felt like a kind of healing. It was my idea to start talking. Not all at once. Not in a rush. Just honestly. We sat at the kitchen table in the afternoon light, a mug cooling between my hands. Kaelen didn't sit across from me like an interrogator. He sat beside me, angled slightly away, giving me space to choose my words. I don't want him to control the story, I said finally. Kaelen nodded. Then we won't let him. He didn't say I'll handle it. He said we. That mattered more than I expected. Tell me what you're comfortable sharing, he said. Only what you want. So I did. I spoke about the way Dante's anger came in waves. About how the house felt smaller over time. About the apologies that sounded convincing until they stopped coming at all. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't soften it either. Kaelen listened without interruption, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and returned with a small folder. He placed it on the table, careful, deliberate. I run a security firm, he said. Part of what we do is documentation. Evidence. Patterns. I stiffened instinctively. This isn't about forcing you into anything, he added immediately. It's about giving you control. I looked at the folder. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said calmly, that if Dante ever tries to rewrite what happened, to deny it, minimize it, intimidate you, we're ready. Something inside me straightened. We started small. Dates. Locations. Messages I still had saved because deleting them felt like lying to myself. Kaelen never touched my phone without asking. Never read over my shoulder unless invited. At one point he paused. May I take photos of the bruising that's still visible? I hesitated, then nodded. He handed me my phone. You do it. I'll tell you what angles help. That was the moment I realized something important. He wasn't taking power. He was returning it. By evening, I felt drained but lighter, like something poisonous had finally been named. That night, Dante called. I stared at the screen as his name lit up, my pulse steady in a way that surprised me. Kaelen saw my expression. You don't have to answer, he said. I know, I replied. I answered anyway. Sloan, Dante said, his voice falsely calm. You embarrassed me today. Running off like that. I left, I said evenly. You overreacted. I almost smiled. I'm not coming back, I said. A pause. Then a sharper edge entered his tone. You don't get to decide that. I looked at Kaelen, who met my gaze steadily. I already did, I said, and ended the call. My hands didn't shake. Kaelen exhaled slowly. That was step one. I nodded. For the first time, Dante didn't feel like a looming shadow. He felt like a man standing in the light, exposed. And I was done protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. I felt it before it happened. The tension,
The shift.
the sense that something unfinished was moving closer. Dante didn't leave messages after that call. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence, the kind that pretends to be restraint but is really calculation. Kaelen noticed the change immediately. He's testing boundaries, he said one morning as he checked the security feed on his phone. Seeing if fear will bring you back.
It won't, I said.
I meant it. That afternoon, I stepped outside to water the small patch of flowers near the porch. My hands were steady as I adjusted the hose, breathing in the familiar scent of damp earth. For a moment, I almost felt normal. Then I heard a car door slam. My spine went cold. Dante stood at the edge of the driveway, his presence like a bruise on the afternoon light. He looked composed, too composed, his eyes scanning the house like he owned it. "Sloan," he said, smiling thinly. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. His smile flickered. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." I didn't step back. I didn't raise my voice. "Leave." He took a step forward. That was when Kaelen appeared. He moved fast but controlled, positioning himself between us without touching either of us. His body was calm, his stance grounded, his voice steady. "She said no," Kaelen said. Dante laughed softly. "And who are you supposed to be?" Kaelen didn't rise to the bait. "The person you don't intimidate." Dante's gaze slid back to me. "You think hiding behind him changes anything?"
I'm not hiding, I said.
"I'm choosing." Something in Dante's expression hardened. "You belong with me." Kaelen stepped closer, not threatening, just unmistakably present. "You're trespassing," he said. "And this conversation is over." Dante's jaw clenched. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "This isn't finished." Kaelen met his stare without blinking. "It is." For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Dante backed away, his composure cracking just enough for me to see it. "You'll regret this," he said to me. I didn't answer. When he drove off, my legs finally gave way. Kaelen caught me instantly, one arm bracing my back, the other steadying my shoulders. He didn't pull me close, didn't assume. He waited. "I'm okay," I said after a moment. He nodded but didn't let go until I was steady again. That night, Kaelen made a call. "I need to accelerate things," he said quietly. "Public exposure. No private threats. No closed doors." I watched him, something warm and fierce blooming in my chest. For so long, I had believed strength looked loud. I was learning it could look like presence, like restraint, like someone standing beside you and saying, "Enough." And for the first time since the mirror shattered, I felt something close to victory. Kaelen didn't tell me everything. Not because he wanted to keep secrets, but because he understood something I was only just learning myself. Healing didn't mean drowning in details. It meant choosing what I could carry. What I did know was this: Dante had grown careless. Men like him always did, when they believed fear still worked. "He wants control back," Kaelen said one evening as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the quiet between us easy now. "That makes him predictable." Predictable. The word tasted strange in my mouth when I thought of Dante. For so long, I had treated him like a force of nature, unavoidable, overwhelming. Now he was being mapped, measured, reduced. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We should talk." Somewhere neutral. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. I showed it to Kaelen. He nodded once. "That's him."
I don't want to see him, I said.
"You won't," he replied. "Not alone." The plan was simple.
Clean.
Legal. Dante would expose himself without realizing it, through words, through behavior, through the arrogance that had always protected him. All I had to do was agree to meet. The cafe was public, busy, full of witnesses. I arrived early and chose a table near the window. My hands rested calmly around my cup. Across the room, Kaelen sat where I could see him, not watching me, watching the space. Dante arrived late, like he always had. He smiled when he saw me, like we were sharing a secret. "There you are," he said, sitting without asking. I didn't return the smile. "You've caused quite a mess," he continued. "People are asking questions."
Good, I said.
His eyes narrowed. "You think you're winning?" "I think I'm done," I replied. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't survive without me." I met his gaze. "I already have." Something dark flickered across his face. "You should be careful," he said. "Accidents happen when people don't know their place." I let the silence stretch. Then I stood. "This conversation is over." As I walked out, I felt it, the moment he realized he had said too much. Outside, Kaelen was already there. "It's done," he said quietly. I exhaled, a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, the story broke, not mine, but his. Not whispered, not hidden.
Public.
Irrefutable. The man who had thrived in shadows suddenly stood under a harsh, unflinching light. Dante tried to call, tried to message, tried to intimidate. None of it reached me, because I wasn't alone anymore. I stood at the window later, watching the city glow, and felt something settle into place. This wasn't revenge driven by rage. It was justice shaped by clarity. And I had never felt stronger. The days after everything broke open felt unreal, like walking through a world that had quietly rearranged itself while I wasn't looking. Dante was everywhere, on screens, in conversations I overheard, in the sudden hush that followed his name. And yet, at the same time, he was nowhere near me. That distance felt deliberate, final. Like a door slammed shut not in anger, but in certainty. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt light. Kaelen noticed it too. "You're breathing differently," he said one morning as we stood in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter. "I think I forgot how," I replied. He smiled softly, not pressing, not claiming credit. That was his way, always allowing me to arrive at things in my own time. Dante tried one last time. It came as a message, not loud, not threatening, just desperate. "You ruined everything." I read it once. Then I deleted it. No response. No explanation. No defense. Silence. This time chosen by me. That afternoon, I packed the last of my things from the life I'd left behind. Not out of anger, but closure. Each object I set aside felt like releasing a version of myself I no longer needed to carry. Kaelen waited by the door, keys in hand, patient as always. "You sure you're ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And I meant it. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Later, we sat on the porch as evening settled in, the sky turning soft and violet. The air smelled faintly of night-blooming flowers. I realized then how much I had missed simple things, quiet moments without fear, without calculation. "Sloan," Kaelen said after a while, his voice careful. "There's something I need to say. And you don't owe me anything in return." I turned to him. "I've loved you for a long time," he continued. "Long enough to know that loving you meant stepping back when you chose someone else. Long enough to know I'd wait if it meant you were safe." My chest tightened. "But I won't pretend anymore," he said gently. "Not now." I didn't rush to answer. I let the truth rise naturally, like breath. "I don't know what I'm ready for yet," I said honestly. "But I know this, I trust you. And that means more to me than words." He nodded, accepting that without disappointment. That night, I slept deeply, peacefully. Not because the past was erased, but because it no longer defined me. Dante had lost his power the moment I stopped fearing him. And for the first time, my future felt open, wide, waiting, and entirely mine. The first morning I woke without flinching felt like a miracle I didn't question. Sunlight spilled across the bed in slow, patient lines. No slammed doors. No tight silence waiting to punish me. Just quiet, real quiet, the kind that lets you stretch your fingers and remember you own your body. I padded into the kitchen and found Kaelen there, sleeves rolled up, moving with the easy grace of someone who had learned discipline the hard way. He looked up when he sensed me, not startled, just attentive. "Morning," he said. "Morning." We stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the space. I realized then how different this felt from everything before. There was no performance here. No fear of doing something wrong. Just presence. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything." "Why didn't you step in sooner?" The question was an accusation. Just curiosity. Kaelen leaned against the counter, considering. "Because you hadn't asked," he said honestly. "And because I didn't want to be another man making decisions for you." The answer settled something deep inside me. That day, we walked through the garden behind the house. I knelt to adjust a rose bush that had tilted overnight, my fingers careful around the thorns. Kaelen crouched nearby, watching with a softness that made my chest ache. "You handle them like they matter," he said. "They do," I replied. Then I looked at him. "So do I." He met my gaze, understanding passing between us, without words. When he reached for my hand, he didn't close his fingers right away. He waited, giving me the space to choose. I laced my fingers through his. The contact was warm, steady. Nothing like the hands that had once hurt me. Kaelen's strength had always been obvious. What surprised me was his gentleness. Every touch felt deliberate, as if he understood that trust was something grown slowly, like the rarest bloom. "I don't want to rush you," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm here." Weeks passed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became mine. I laughed more, slept better. I started noticing beauty again in small things. The way light caught on petals, the calm rhythm of shared meals, the safety of knowing I would be heard. One evening, as we watched the sky darken, Kaelen spoke softly. "I don't want to protect you, because you're fragile," he said. "I want to stand beside you, because you're strong." I turned to him, emotion tightening my throat. That's all I ever wanted. When I chose him, it wasn't out of fear or need. It was desire. It was trust. It was clarity. I had been broken once, thrown into glass and taught to shrink. Now I was handled like something rare. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that love was never meant to hurt.